The first thing Xie Muyun did after becoming the top scholar was to break off our engagement. At that time, I was still holding the hangover soup I had made for him. Hearing his words, I was stunned for a long time. Long enough for the bowl's edge to leave a mark on my hand. Long enough for him to frown and call out softly, "Shan Shan?" I came back to my senses at his call, then put the bowl on the table and said quietly, "All right." 2 years later, when I returned to the capital and saw him again, I respectfully called him cousin and then walked behind him, grabbing the ear of the young general who had just returned from the battlefield. "Gu Yunfei, didn't I tell you not to drink when your wound hasn't healed? Are you disobeying doctor's orders again?" Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Xie Muyun was the youngest top scholar of this dynasty. He was in high spirits at the imperial banquet, and when he rode through the streets, the young ladies of the capital threw their sachets and handkerchiefs at him without restraint. I sat in a private room of a tea house, watching him pass by in his grand red official robes, stirring up a frenzy among his admirers. "Brother is coming." Xie Yulan, the young lady of the Xie family, excitedly pulled me to the window and then stuffed a sachet into my hand, winking mischievously. "Shan Shan, you should throw one too." I watched the person passing under my window without even glancing at me, gripping the sachet tightly in my hand. In the end, I gently shook my head. "Let's go back. He will inevitably drink today, we should go make some hangover soup." I returned to the Xie mansion to make the soup. Yes, I now live in the Xie mansion. If we follow the common saying, perhaps I could be considered half a child bride of the Xie family. The childhood engagement between Xie Muyun and me was originally just a joke between our parents. No one took it seriously. But when I was 10, my father angered the emperor with his straightforward advice, and was demoted to a small place in City L to be a county magistrate. City L was known for its miasma, and my parents couldn't bear to let their young child suffer there, so they entrusted me to the Xie family. Lord Xie and my father were classmates, and my mother was a close friend of Madame Xie. Initially, I moved in as a cousin, but since there was no actual blood relation between the Qin family and the Xie family, to avoid the emperor's punishment, they decided to make this marriage arrangement official. To the outside world, it was said that the two families had arranged a childhood engagement, and the girl was left in the Xie mansion to be raised until she was old enough to marry. The Xie family was generous and kept their word, but it was hard on Xie Muyun. So I tried even harder to be good to him. As a small child, I started learning to take care of his daily needs, attending to every detail. Now, 7 years have passed. Lord and Madame Xie are very satisfied with me. And even Xie Yulan, the young lady of the Xie family, sees me as her sister-in-law. Only Xie Muyun, who used to be very close to me when we were young, has become increasingly distant in recent years. His change in attitude actually made me a bit sad, but I've always been optimistic. In life, time reveals people's true hearts. There's no need to rush. The hangover soup had been simmering for over an hour, but Xie Muyun still hadn't returned. Madame Xie had the carriage prepared and asked me to go pick him up. I understood she was trying to help us develop our relationship, so naturally, I couldn't refuse. The carriage swayed back and forth until we reached the splendid pavilion, the largest restaurant in the capital. These new scholars were already drunk in a heap. I brought a servant to pull Xie Muyun out from the crowd. Xie Muyun actually had a very low alcohol tolerance. By now, his consciousness was very hazy, but when he saw me, he still frowned reflexively, with a hint of annoyed irritation, mumbling as if in a dream. "Why are you here again? Heaven above, I've been in the Xie mansion for 7 years. And the number of times I've gone out to pick him up can be counted on one hand. The last time was probably nearly a year ago. This again was truly unwarranted." I mentally rolled my eyes, but outwardly maintained the grace and composure of a young lady from a noble family, saying, "You has had too much to drink. Let's return to the mansion first." Xie Muyun vomited his guts out in the carriage. Fortunately, I had the foresight to ask my maid Dongmei to bring a few bags. Otherwise either he or I would have had to roll out of the carriage today. After throwing up, he calmed down considerably. His body leaned against the carriage wall, but his head gradually tilted towards my shoulder. In his hazy state, he mumbled, "You smell so nice. Alcohol truly makes people drunk." The usually cold and reserved Sia Muyun could actually say such frivolous words. It was truly frightening. Dame, sitting on the other side, teasingly winked at me. I glared at her with a red face, but inwardly warned myself not to think too much of it. I love medicine, and I usually enjoy experimenting with nourishing medicinal foods or calming fragrances. Today, I brought a sachet that could calm the mind and relieve drunkenness. He probably just found the scent comfortable. Sia Muyun went straight to bed when we returned to the manor. And we couldn't get him to drink the sobering soup at all. Chuyi, his personal attendant, and I struggled for a long time before finally giving up. I wiped the sweat from my brow. Take good care of him. It's easy to get a headache after a night of drinking. I'll bring some headache-relieving medicine tomorrow. Chuyi also sighed in relief and said, "Don't worry, Miss Chin." The next morning, I woke up early and prepared a soup to relieve hangovers and pain. I personally brought it to Sia Muyun's courtyard. I knocked on the door, but heard his voice, hoarse from drinking and somewhat panicked, say, "Wait a moment." So I waited at the stone table in the courtyard for a quarter of an hour before Sia Muyun finally arrived. He sat down opposite me with a dignified demeanor, and his first words were, "Qin Shanshan, let's break off our engagement." These words came too suddenly. I had just picked up the hangover soup I had prepared for him. And upon hearing this, I was stunned for a long time. Long enough for the bull's rim to leave an imprint on my hand. Long enough for him to frown and call out softly, "Shan Shan?" I came back to my senses and asked in a trembling voice, "Why? Why indeed? What had I done wrong to deserve such rejection?" He seemed to know what I was thinking. "It's not that I dislike you. I just don't want a marriage arranged by our parents and matchmakers." Qin Shanshan, ask yourself honestly, do you really like me? I lowered my eyes, my eyelashes trembling slightly, and interrupted. "What if I say I do like you?" He seemed unprepared for such words from the usually reserved Miss Chin. After a long pause, he continued with some difficulty. "But Shanshan, I only see you as a sister. I don't like you that way." I gave a bitter smile and said softly, "I know. He doesn't like me. Actually, I've always known. I had thought that with time, true feelings would develop. But alas, his heart is like iron, unchangeable. I had tried my best, but if it's truly unchangeable, then let it be." I put the bowl in my hand on the table and said softly, "All right, let's break off the engagement." When Madame Sia's maid came to call me, I was collecting the medicinal herbs drying in the courtyard. She was in such a hurry that she was sweating profusely. She grabbed my hand and urged me to go. "Miss Chin, please hurry to the ancestral hall. The Lord is going to beat the young master to death." It turned out that because Sia Muyun wanted to break off our engagement, Lord Xia had tied him up in the ancestral hall and was administering family punishment. I hurriedly followed the maid. Lord Xia had already struck once with a rattan cane, all the while saying, "Lord Qin is righteous and once saved the lives of our classmates. It's an honor for our Xia family to marry his daughter. How dare you break off the engagement?" As he spoke, another strike of the cane fell. Madame Xia was crying on the side, clutching her handkerchief, but not daring to step forward. Seeing this, I quickly called out, "Uncle Xia!" Lord Xia turned to me and said, "Don't worry, Wanling. I will surely beat this wretched boy into submission and give you an explanation." Wanling was the courtesy name I received during my coming-of-age ceremony 2 years ago. It was personally chosen by my parents in City L and sent to the capital. Uncle Xia was very fond of it. Xia Muyun knelt on the ground, his back straight and neck stiff, his tone quite resentful. "If Uncle Qin has done you a favor, then why don't you marry Qin Wanling yourself? Unfilial son." "What did you say?" These words were indeed excessive. Uncle Xia trembled with anger, and I felt a chill run through my body. But I still stepped forward to stop Lord Xia from striking again. "Uncle, it was I who wanted to break off the engagement." In the end, my engagement with Xia Muyun was indeed broken off. The betrothal gifts were a pair of mandarin duck jade pendants bestowed by the emperor. When my father earned the top score in the imperial examinations, the Xie family returned both to me. With the engagement broken, I no longer had a reason to stay at the Xie manor. However, I had already come of age and was an adult. I didn't necessarily need to live under someone else's roof. Every time my parents wrote to me, they would tell me about the customs and culture of City L. I had never seen it before, and I wanted to go and have a look. Actually, it didn't have to be City L. I had never seen anything outside the capital, and I could go anywhere to see the world. Although the marriage was called off, Xie Muyun had a quarrel with Uncle Xie and went to a friend's house to recover from his injuries, refusing to return home. Uncle Xie was so angry he fell ill and was now bedridden as well. So on the day I left the Xie family, only Madame Xie held my hand and wiped away tears. Muyun has now gained the emperor's favor, his wings have hardened. And even his father and I can't persuade him anymore. I comfortingly held Madame Xie's hand and said, "Uncle and Aunt need not blame yourselves. I will always remember the kindness the Xie family has shown me. And as for cousin Xie, he has actually done his duty to the fullest. I had lived in the Xie family for 7 years. And he had never mistreated me, just not been as close as ordinary engaged couples. What fault was his? He simply didn't like me." Madame Xie was still wiping away tears, but I smiled with acceptance. That day when he told me he didn't want a marriage arranged by parents and matchmakers, I thought about it for a long time and found it quite reasonable. All these years we've been bound by our engagement. I haven't met other young men, and he couldn't get to know other girls. Perhaps I should indeed go out and see, maybe there are people we like more out there. Please help me convey to him that I've held him back these past few years. I wish him to find a good match and have a peaceful and smooth life. This was the last message that 17-year-old Qin Wanling left for Xie Muyun. When Xie Muyun recovered from his injuries and returned home, it was already a month later. This month had not been pleasant for him. On the surface, he was a cold and refined gentleman, but inside he had quite a rebellious streak. The doctor had applied medicine to his back and instructed him on various dietary restrictions, which he agreed to but completely refused to follow. As a result, his wound worsened one day and became infected the next, causing unbearable discomfort. Zhu Yi advised him earnestly, "My young master, my top scholar, won't you listen to the doctor and take good care for a while?" Xie Muyun was also a bit irritated. Why didn't I find it so troublesome when I was injured or sick before? Zhu Yi said helplessly. Before, it was always Miss Qin who took care of you personally. She remembered all the dietary restrictions and then made medicinal dishes that were both tasty and healing. We don't have that skill. Xie Muyun was struck dumb. To be fair, Qin Shanshan had indeed treated him very well. It was just that he really didn't want to be forced by his father to marry a so-called daughter of a benefactor. So he had been cold towards her in many ways. Now that he had gotten over his anger with his father, he suddenly felt that his words and actions that day had been inappropriate. And perhaps he should go apologize to Qin Shanshan. Even if they were no longer engaged, she still called him cousin after all. So he queued up to buy osmanthus cakes, thinking of ways to coax her on the way, telling himself that in the future when they addressed each other as brother and sister, he would still protect her. But Qin Shanshan was gone. He frowned in confusion. The Qin residence is now empty. Where did she go after leaving the Xie family? His mother, who usually indulged him, rarely showed him an unfriendly face that day. The world is big, where can't she go? Then she poked his forehead in exasperation. You clueless boy, a good girl like Shanshan is hard to find even with a lantern. Now you're clamoring to break off the engagement. You'll have plenty to cry about later. Cry? Impossible. There are plenty of good girls in the world. How could he hang himself on one tree? But for some reason, he still felt a bit empty inside. He threw aside the osmanthus cakes he was holding in defiance. Humph, she really has grown wings and hardened. But how far can a girl go on her own? When she's had enough of wandering, she'll come back one day. He didn't expect that when Qin Shanshan left, it would be for a full 2 years. When I left the capital, I only brought Dongmei with me. I was skilled in medicine, and Dongmei had martial arts to protect us. Although we were just 2 young girls, we managed to get by quite well. We traveled and explored along the way, and in less than half a year, We arrived at the Province J next to City L. There was no help for it. The terrain of City L was too complex. We got lost for a while and had to enter Province J first. As usual, we rented a courtyard to stay in the local area. And then I began to make house calls to earn money. But one day on the way out, we picked up a man. It was a cliché plot, but I still saved him. For no other reason than the fact that he was wearing our dynasty's military uniform. Dame was uneasy. Miss, perhaps we shouldn't save him. I shook my head. Look at the insignia on his clothes. He's from the Gu family army guarding City M. He's a hero protecting our nation's borders, so we must save him. His injuries weren't too severe, but he had lost a lot of blood. Dame and I carried him back home and took good care of him. For 2 days before he finally regained consciousness. At that time, I was changing the dressing on his wound. When he woke up, he instinctively grabbed my throat and said coldly, "Who are you?" "You're a lifesaver." His hand tightened a bit, his voice still cold enough to freeze. "You'd better tell the truth." I rolled my eyes. "I already said I'm your lifesaver. If you don't let go, it's going to look like you're repaying kindness with enmity." He surveyed the surroundings, seemingly finding nothing suspicious, and hesitantly released my throat. But he still seemed uneasy, so he threw out another fierce threat, though it sounded more bark than bite. "You'd better not have any other intentions, or this general will kill you." As he spoke, he lowered his head to look at his wounds. But he saw my hands changing the dressing on his chest. The man who had just been as cold as the king of hell suddenly turned bright red. He abruptly pushed away my hands, wrapped his clothes tightly around himself, and stammered. Why you, men and women should not have physical contact." "Oh, then change your own dressing." I was already in a bad mood from being choked. So I simply dusted off my hands and went out to see patients and make money. The person I saved was the young master of the Gu family, Gu Jun. I had heard of his reputation back in the capital. Young General Gu had been guarding Province J with his father and brothers since he was young. He was extremely handsome, but unfortunately, he had inherited his father's cold demeanor, like a little king of hell. The first half of that description was quite accurate. Gu Jun was indeed very good-looking after he was cleaned up. But the latter half was debatable. After a few days of interaction, this young king of hell actually showed quite a bit of a mischievous child's temperament. "I am a dignified 5th-rank general. How dare you make me chop firewood?" I calmly arranged my medicine box. "You eat my food and live in my house. Shouldn't you do some work in return?" He clutched his chest and rolled around on the bed, "But I'm still injured." I picked up my medicine box, ready to go out. "All right, according to the treatment for an injured person. Dame and I will have fish soup for dinner, and you'll have stir-fried cabbage." Gu Jun sat up with a start, righteously declaring, "My dear benefactor, I was wrong. I'll go chop the wood right away." He nimbly rolled off to chop firewood, while Dame and I went out to see patients. This kind of scene was played out almost daily. The first time Dame saw this, she was very angry. The second time, she was confused. By the third time, she was numb. "Miss, do you think there's something wrong with his head? He ends up doing all the chores you assign him anyway. So why does he always have to argue with you before doing the work?" "I don't know. Maybe he's just bored. All the mischievous children I've encountered during my house calls are like this." On Gu Jun's 20th day here, before I went out for a house call, I instructed him as usual. Split the firewood, boil some hot water, and take out all the herbs in the west room to dry in the sun. All right. Such obedience was unusual. I looked up suspiciously, but he kept his head down, not looking at me. After a moment's pause, I realized. "Are you going back to the military camp?" I had almost forgotten he was a young general. Gu Jun mumbled, hum. "When are you leaving?" "Tonight." "Okay, then I'll buy fewer groceries for lunch." "Qin Wanling." Gu Jun looked up at me with wide, angry eyes, though his eyelids were slightly red. I chuckled. "What? You want to eat dinner before leaving? I'm afraid you won't make it back to City M before dark then. Don't you have anything else to say?" He looked at me very seriously, and I gradually stopped smiling. "What should I say? We had indeed gotten along very well these 20 days, but so what? Xian Muyun and I were once childhood friends too, but look where we ended up. I no longer dare to give my heart easily, nor do I dare to confirm a relationship lightly. Besides, I've stayed in Province J long enough, and it's time to continue on to City L to see my parents. So I smiled and said, well then, young General Gu, eat well and don't be picky. May we meet again if fate allows. It took me another month to finally reach City L. I had already sent them a letter, so my parents weren't too surprised when they saw me. But after all, we had been separated for over 7 years. I had grown from a little girl into a young woman. My mother couldn't stop crying when she saw me. And in the end, the three of us, along with Dongmei, spent an entire day hugging and talking. After hearing about our journey, my father was amazed at my current medical skills, and told everyone he had raised a little miracle doctor. The local magistrate, whose ears were nearly calloused from my father's constant talk, suddenly brightened up while looking at some documents. Qin, we have few station troops in City L, but the neighboring Province J is severely short of military doctors. Why not let your daughter become a military doctor there? Mother cautiously said, our Shanshan is a young lady. It might not be appropriate for her to enter a camp full of men. But father patted his chest proudly and said, I don't know about other military camps, but Gu's camp is absolutely no problem. That was true. Even I, a sheltered girl, had heard of the strict discipline in the Gu family's army. Mother still had some doubts, but I nodded. Firstly, I was naturally delighted to be able to contribute to the soldiers guarding our country's borders. And secondly, there happened to be someone I wanted to see a bit, and he was in Province J. On my first day in City M, I saw Gu Jun. At that time, Deputy General Chen, who was in charge of managing the military doctors, was giving us newcomers a talk. Gu Jun happened to pass by, and I winked at him. To my surprise, he didn't seem shocked to see me. He just gave me a cold glance and walked away as if nothing had happened. In his silver armor, he truly looked like the legendary cold-faced king of hell. I thought perhaps he had looked too hastily and didn't recognize me. So that evening, I specially went to his tent, but was stopped by his personal guard outside. Who dares to intrude on the general's tent at night? I hurriedly explained, I'm a military doctor, I want to. What is a doctor doing here? A cold voice came from inside the tent, and Gu Jun immediately lifted the curtain and came out. I waved, hey, Gu Jun, it's me. Who are you? I don't know you. Gu Jun didn't recognize me anymore. Indeed, all men are ungrateful wolves. Fortunately, I didn't develop anything further with him back then. Otherwise I might have had to cancel another engagement. I angrily returned to my own tent and started focusing on being a military doctor. Only after coming to the military camp did I realize that my previous medical skills were far from enough. There was so much to learn. I followed Dr. Hu, the most senior doctor here, and was so busy every day that I had no time to think about that ungrateful Gu Jun. Dr. Su, who was as eager to learn as I was, had been transferred from Southern. He was gentle, polite, and very considerate. One day, we were heatedly discussing whether it was better to make horizontal or vertical incisions for bone scraping therapy, when suddenly a resentful voice as cold as ice chips came from behind. What are you doing? Dr. Su and I were both startled. We had been gesturing back and forth, and when we stopped, his right hand happened to be covering my left hand. Gu Jun leaned slightly behind me, staring intently at our overlapping hands. His gaze was icy, even more frightening than when he first choked me. Dr. Su moved his hand away, his ears turning red. Reporting to the general, this humble official was discussing bone-scraping therapy techniques with Miss Qin. Gu Jun raised an eyebrow, his tone carrying a hint of threat. Miss Qin? In the military camp, one should address by official titles. Dr. Su, does this need to be reminded by me? Damn it. Long after he left, Dr. Su still couldn't quite recover. Covering his right hand that had nearly been frozen by that gaze, he dazedly said, Miss. Dr. Qin, do you and young General Gu have some history? I snorted coldly. No, not familiar, don't know him. Gu Jun not only forgot the kindness shown to him, but he also repaid it with enmity. In the dead of night, his personal guard came to my tent and woke me up. Dr. Sue, the general's old wound is acting up. Please come and take a look. I was very confused. It's not my shift today. This is a military order. Fine, your territory, your rules. I put on my clothes and picked up my medicine box, then went to Gujun's tent. He was sitting cross-legged on the couch, wearing only a layer of snow-white undergarment, with the collar slightly open, revealing glimpses of his bronze-colored skin. I sighed wistfully. Ah, he's no longer that shy man who wrapped himself up and talked about maintaining propriety between men and women. Which old wound of the general's is acting up? Gujun stared at me, his gaze particularly resentful in the flickering candlelight. My heart. My hand paused as I was opening the medicine box. I probably knew what kind of temper he was throwing again. Your heart? That requires undressing. Men and women should maintain propriety. General, please find someone else more suitable. I picked up my medicine box to leave, but Gujun behind me leaped from the bed like a desperate dog and blocked my way. Qin Wanling. I raised an eyebrow and looked at him mockingly. General, don't call me that. We're strangers. Please address me by my title, Dr. Qin. Gujun's imposing manner suddenly weakened, and he hung his head dejectedly in front of me. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I just couldn't help feeling upset. Upset about what? He looked at me accusingly. When I said I was leaving back then, you weren't sad at all. What's there to be sad about? It's been less than 3 months, and we've met again, haven't we? But you didn't tell me then that you were coming to be a military doctor. Back then, I thought that he would be stationed here in Province J anyway. So it wouldn't be difficult for me to find him. But I seemed to have forgotten that he didn't know my identity. He didn't know where I came from or where I was going. Only that I was a female traveling doctor named Qin Wanling. I knew how to find him, but he didn't know where to look for me. Thinking about it this way, I felt a bit guilty. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have joked with you like that back then. Gujun didn't call me over for nothing, his old wound had indeed flared up. I pushed him back onto the bed. There was already a faint trace of blood seeping from the wound on his chest. Why didn't you say earlier that you were really injured? He said somewhat pitifully, you ran away first, didn't you? Fine, I did leave first, but ultimately this was still due to his poor historical record. Fortunately, the wound hadn't reopened too severely. Applying some hemostatic medicine would suffice. I dipped my fingertip in the hemostatic powder and carefully applied it to his wound. I applied the medicine meticulously and carefully, afraid of hurting him, so I was particularly slow and gentle. I didn't notice that he had already tensed up his entire body. As I was applying, a drop of sweat slid down his jaw and fell on my cheek as I leaned in close. I looked up, puzzled. Are you hot? His face was clearly red from heat, but he stubbornly said, no. Then, gritting his teeth and looking like he was about to cry, he said, can you hurry up? I'm going this slow to avoid hurting whom? Ungrateful. I quickly finished applying the medicine to the rest of the wound. Some powder had gotten on the uninjured skin, so I leaned in and blew a breath to remove it. This elicited a suppressed groan from Gu Jun. Ugh. I quickly looked up. What's wrong? Does it hurt? He averted his eyes as if to cover something up and said in a hoarse voice. It's nothing. You can go back now. I'll take care of the rest. The wound is on your chest. How can you bandage it by yourself? His tone seemed to be on the verge of collapse. I can do it. Please leave quickly. I'm begging you. How strange. So I picked up my medicine box and went back to sleep, feeling drowsy. After Qin Shanshan left, Gu Jun called in his personal guard Wu Yi. Wu Yi, being very perceptive, picked up the gauze to bandage him, but was waved off by Gu Jun. Don't bother, it'll get wet again soon anyway. Go fetch me a bucket of cold water first. Wu Yi looked at him curiously. General, it's so late, and you're injured. Surely you can't take a cold bath? Gu Jun gazed at the sky with a look of despair and sighed deeply. A cold bath might aggravate my old injury. But if I don't take one, your general here might drop dead on the spot. Which do you think I should choose? Wu Yi didn't quite understand, but it sounded serious, so he'd better just do as told. That night, Gu Jun soaked in cold water for a full half-hour. Before he could quench the shameful changes in his body and the fire of desire burning within, he let out a long sigh of relief, then chuckled bitterly. He was the one who had asked her to come. Yet in the end, he was the one suffering the consequences. When her breath brushed past him, young General Gu was utterly defeated for the first time in his life. It seemed that in the future, she would truly have him wrapped around her finger. That Gu Jun has become increasingly brazen lately, even snatching away my pair of Mandarin duck jade pendants. It happened when I was bandaging him one time, and my pendant fell down. He picked it up and examined it carefully, then shamelessly demanded, "It's actually a pair. Give me one, will you?" I was silent for a moment, then honestly said, "This pendant. I've given it to someone else before." Hearing this, he looked at me in horror. "Didn't you say the engagement was called off?" "It was called off." I suddenly realized halfway through my sentence. "How did you know?" Gu Jun, relieved after confirming the broken engagement, held the pendant proudly and said, "When Minister Qin was young, he and my old man were rivals in the imperial court. Before you came to City M, your father's letter had already arrived. He said his daughter was coming as a military doctor and asked my father to take good care of you. Qin Shanshan, courtesy name Wanling." He narrowed his eyes. "Dr. Qin, why didn't you tell me you were Minister Qin's daughter when you saved me?" "Well, I really didn't know. When old General Gu came to guard City M with his sons, I was only 4 or 5 years old and couldn't remember much. Besides, when my father was the chief censor back then, responsible for monitoring and advising, he had countless rivals in the imperial court. I couldn't keep track of who was who. But suddenly I realized something. So when you first saw me that day and remained so calm, it was because you had already received news of my arrival, right?" "Yes, I was actually angry with you at that time and didn't want to see you. But in the end, I couldn't resist and went to the medical camp anyway. Gu Jun has been pestering me lately about making our relationship official. And he won't let me call him Gu Jun anymore, insisting I use his courtesy name, Yunfei. I'm exasperated by his persistence. Haven't I already given you the Mandarin duck jade pendant? What more do you want to make it official?" He said seriously, "The token is one thing, but we need a proper betrothal letter to make it official." "A betrothal letter? That would require our parents to write." But he reminded me of something. "The betrothal letter between Xie Muyun and me, it's probably still at the Xie family's house." Gu Yunfei was on high alert about this, but I waved my hand dismissively. "It's fine. Xie Muyun couldn't wait to break off our engagement. He must have just forgotten to return the letter. We can ask for it back later." But Gu Yunfei said very seriously, "I think you're being overly optimistic. If I had such a wonderful girl like you, I would never let go." I was amused by his solemn expression and reached out to scratch his chin. "To each his own. Don't worry, Xie Muyun doesn't like me." He narrowed his eyes in pleasure like a big cat as I scratched him, but suddenly widened them again. "Wait a minute, his name is Xie Muyun, and my name is Gu Yunfei. Qin Wanling. You don't happen to have some strange preference for names with the character Yun, do you? Are you crazy?" I stood on tiptoe and gave him a smack on the head. "What on earth are you thinking about all day? Can't you be normal for even a minute?" I stayed in the military camp in City M for a full year, and gained a lot. First, my medical skills improved greatly and were highly praised in the camp. Secondly, my relationship with Gu Yunfei also gradually stabilized. However, since my betrothal letter with Xie Muyun had not yet been destroyed, he was still somewhat jealous. But fortunately, my father had already served 3 terms in City L, a total of 9 years with outstanding achievements. Moreover, the emperor had been getting his way in court for the past few years. Feeling a bit lonely at the top, and finally remembered my outspoken father who wasn't afraid to speak truth to power, and wanted to recall him to the capital. At the same time, General Gu was also ordered to return to the capital to report on his duties. This was a good opportunity to retrieve my betrothal letter with Xie Muyun, and sign a new one with Gu Yunfei. So we each followed our respective fathers and set out on the journey back to the capital. There were too many things to arrange in the military camp. So I had to leave a step ahead of Gu Jun. When I was leaving, he clung to me and refused to let go, even wanting to leave with me first, under the beautiful pretext of escorting our Qin's family. Unfortunately, General Gu knew his son like the back of his hand and immediately rolled his eyes to the sky. Escort? Is that really escorting? Your true intention is not what you claim. My relationship with Gu Jun was no longer a secret. Half of the military camp in City M knew we were to be engaged, and both sets of parents gladly approved. But this return to the capital to report on duties was official business. And the emperor's edict had specifically mentioned Gu Jun's name. So it wouldn't be appropriate for him not to follow the main group. So he had to reluctantly accept this fact. The day my parents came to City M to pick me up, they were talking with General Gu in the main tent, and Gu Jun came to my tent to help me pack my luggage. While packing, he anxiously instructed me. I've packed all the medicines you often use, they're in the yellow bundle in the second carriage. The climate in the capital is colder, bring more thick clothes. I've already instructed the coachman and guards your father brought. The terrain in Province J is complex, don't take the route that. I sat calmly at the table, resting my cheek on my hand, watching him bustle about in my tent, chattering non-stop. Without realizing it, my eyes curved into a smile. Gu Yunfei. What is it? He turned back to look at me quizzically. I shook my head. Nothing, I just wanted to call your name. I just wanted to call your name, to hear your response, and feel especially at ease. Thinking that I won't be able to see you for a long time. It feels like a small piece is missing from my heart, leaving me feeling empty and at a loss. Even before parting, I'm already missing you. So this is what it feels like to like someone. When Gu Jun tied up the last bundle in his hand, I came to my senses and handed him a cup of tea, smiling. Thank you for your hard work, young General Gu. He arrogantly took a sip to moisten his throat from my hand, then reached out to pinch my cheek, saying dissatisfied. Qin Wanling, I've been busy all this time, don't you have anything you want to say to me? What should I say? With parting imminent, it seems like I want to say everything, yet anything I say feels superfluous. In the silence, he bristled again. You ungrateful little thing, you're not going to tell me to eat well and not be picky again, are you? Let me tell you, Qin Wanling. His voice suddenly stopped. Because just then, on a whim, I had stood on tiptoe and planted a light kiss on his cheek. Everything around seemed to fall silent at this gentle touch. And looking at his dumbfounded expression and gradually reddening ears, I said seriously. Gu Yunfei, I'll be waiting for you in the capital. We had only been back in the capital for a day. And before the old residence was even properly settled, we received a basket full of invitations. Among them were Father's old colleagues and Mother's close friends. Father declined them all, only accepting the invitation from the Xie family. No matter what, they were willing to take you in at the risk of incurring the emperor's wrath during his fury. We must remember this kindness. Mother nodded in agreement. Although you and Muyun were not meant to be, the Xie family still cared for you for 7 years. We should visit them and express our gratitude properly. Unfortunately, before we could prepare gifts and visit, Lord Xie brought his whole family to visit us first. Father wanted to express his thanks, but Uncle Xie stopped him. Years ago, when I was falsely accused and imprisoned, if it weren't for you speaking up for justice, I might not have the life I have today. This is just returning the favor, how could I accept your thanks? Father shook his head. Back then, as the chief censor and advisor, it was my duty. It doesn't count as a favor. While the elders exchanged pleasantries at the head of the table, Xia Yulan pulled my hand aside and explained. Shan, my brother has some urgent matters to attend to recently and really couldn't get away. He will visit separately later. He didn't want to see me, which was understandable. Being busy with official duties was also a very appropriate explanation. I showed my understanding. It's all right. He's busy with official matters now, there's no need to come specially. Xia Yulan waved her hand. I'm not just being polite with you. He really couldn't get away. If it weren't for the emperor personally appointing him to oversee this matter without error, He probably would have flown here on wings already. Then she leaned close to my ear and whispered, I'll tell you a secret, in these 2 years, Mother and I talked about you the most. But I think the one who missed you most was actually my brother. Every time your letter arrived, he would be the first to read it. Shuyi even said that when my brother was drunk, he would often call your name. She leaned back in her chair, sighing with an air beyond her years. Ah, men are all like this. They only know to cherish after losing. I laughed and tapped her head. Stop reading so many romance novels. You're too young to be thinking about such useless things. She covered her head and complained indignantly. I'm telling the truth. He must miss you, otherwise, MMPH. Her sudden loud voice drew the attention of the elders at the main seats. I quickly picked up a piece of cake and stuffed it into her mouth. Then I looked towards the main seats, forcing a laugh. Yulan is a bit hungry. Why don't we have a meal together? I naturally believed that Aunt Xia and Yulan missed me. As for Xia Muyun, perhaps he missed me too. Although he didn't like me, we did live under the same roof for 7 years. So there was some sibling affection. But that's different from liking someone. The army's pace was indeed faster than ours. Just 5 days after I returned to the capital, the Gu army arrived in the capital. That day, Xia Yulan rented a private room in a tea house again, dragging me along to watch the excitement. As this was for a duty report, they only brought 1,000 troops. But marching on the streets of the capital, it still looked quite grand. Border heroes are always especially respected, and these were all young and handsome soldiers. The girls of the capital went crazy again. The scene no less than when the top scholars paraded through the streets. Gu Jun rode at the front on a white horse with a silver helmet. The main target for the girls' perfume sachets and handkerchiefs. I watched that approaching silver figure, tall and cold, seemingly unrelated to the surrounding clamor. No wonder he earned the title Cold-Faced Young King of Hell. For the first time, I clearly recognized that he was that young general who once pursued the enemy alone for 1,000 miles, making the barbarians tremble at the mere mention of his name. But I rarely saw him like this. Perhaps my stare was too intense as I was lost in thought. He suddenly seemed to sense something and looked up. Unexpectedly, that familiar handsome face crashed into my view. I don't know why, but on impulse, I untied the sachet at my waist and threw it down. He was actually still quite far from me, and the sachet wouldn't hit him. But for some reason, at that moment I just wanted to do this. However, unexpectedly, when Gu Jun saw me throw down the sachet, he was stunned for a moment. Then he actually leapt from his horse, precisely identifying that hint of medicinal fragrance among all the floral scents, and caught it in his hand, then swiftly returned to his horse. The whole movement was smooth and fluid, winning a round of cheers. Amidst the thunderous applause, he held up the sachet and smiled proudly at me. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. Amid the waving red sleeves throughout the building, the young general had caught only my sachet, smiling as if spring had arrived and the ice and snow had melted. I returned home, my face still inexplicably flushed. I hastily ate a few bites of dinner before retreating to my own courtyard. After catching the sachet, he mouthed, "Wait for me tonight." So after dinner, I did nothing but wait for him in the courtyard. However, when there was still no sign of him by 9 p.m., my anticipation turned to anger, and I stormed off to the Gu residence. The steward at the Gu residence said the court had arranged a welcoming banquet at the splendid pavilion. So I furiously made my way there instead. To my surprise, the first person I encountered at the splendid pavilion was Xie Muyun. At that moment, he was drunk, leaning against a tree trunk in the courtyard and vomiting. I paused in my steps, and my first thought was, if Xie Muyun, a mere reception official, was this drunk, how much must Gu Jun, the guest of honor, have had to drink? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Just as I was about to enter the room, someone grabbed my wrist. His eyes were red from vomiting. "Qin Shanshan, you've finally come again. It's been 2 years since I last saw you, that again doesn't seem quite appropriate. Lord Xia, you're drunk." He froze at my words, his eyes growing even redder. "What did you call me?" I seriously reconsidered, thinking that addressing him as Lord Xia might have been too formal. Given the Xie family's 7 years of care for me, calling him cousin wouldn't be too much. So I pried his hand off, gave a cursory bow, and said, "Hello, cousin Xie." "Goodbye, cousin Xie." Then I rushed into the private room, grabbed Gu Jun's ear from among a pile of wine jars. "Gu Yunfei, I told you to drink less because of your injuries. Are you ignoring doctor's orders again?" This welcoming banquet was mostly for the Gu family troops from City M, whom I knew almost all of. Before setting out, they had just repelled an enemy attack, and many were injured. It had been less than 2 months since then, so they couldn't possibly have fully recovered. As a military doctor, I despise patients who don't follow medical advice the most. "Vice Commander Chen, is your arm healed and no longer hurting?" "Lieutenant Su, was that arrow not deep enough for you? Do you want it to fester even more? And you, Wui, has that gash on your back healed completely that you're drinking?" At my angry shout, more than half of the Gu family troops sheepishly put down their wine bowls. My anger not yet subsided, I turned to the civil officials present. "And you lot, it's a welcoming banquet, sure, but why the alcohol? Don't you know they're injured and can't drink much? Can't you consider the military doctor's feelings?" Under my fiery assault, the others scattered like birds and beasts, leaving only me and the drunken Gu Jun in the room. He had drunk quite a bit and was already half drunk, only knowing how to cling to my arm and grin stupidly, unable to fight back or understand my scolding. At a loss, I could only borrow the splendid pavilion's kitchen to brew a bowl of sobering soup to help him regain his senses. Unexpectedly, when I returned with the soup, Xie Muyun was still in the courtyard. He seemed to have sobered up considerably after vomiting, but was still clearly unwell, as his gaze fixed on the sobering soup in my hands. "The Qin family's secret sobering recipe, everyone who's tried it says it's good," I considerately said. "There's some left in the kitchen, cousin Xie. You can go and get a bowl yourself." He opened his mouth, seemingly wanting to say something. But before he could speak, Gu Jun inside the room let out a timely groan, calling for me. I quickly responded and went in to deliver the soup, not seeing Xie Muyun's face gradually turning pale behind me. When Zhu Yi came on orders to escort Xie Muyun back to the manor, the lively banquet had already dispersed, leaving only his young master sitting alone on the steps, gazing at the moon. In the moonlight, dressed in red official robes, he looked strangely desolate and forlorn. The brilliant young Xie scholar who had rapidly risen through official ranks now seemed like a lost child. "Zhu Yi, I saw her, but it seems she doesn't want me anymore." After receiving news that the Qin family was returning to the capital, he had been excited for a long time. He had prepared gifts early, intending to visit and apologize, to renew their engagement. Unfortunately, just as the Qin family arrived in the capital, the emperor summoned him to the palace, tasking him to work with the Ministry of Rights to personally handle the welcoming reception for the garrison troops from City M. The matter of proposing had to be temporarily set aside. Yes, he had planned to propose. In fact, there had been signs of his fondness for Qin Shanshan for a long time. Ever since she moved into the Xie manor as his cousin, he had unconsciously paid attention to her. Though just a young girl living under others' roof, she carried herself with dignity and propriety. Later, to ensure she could live comfortably, they became engaged. Regarding this matter, his father hadn't consulted him, but made the decision directly. "Lord Qin once saved our Xie family. Now we should repay that debt of gratitude." His father never understood the concept of discussing things with others. It was the same when he made him study, take the imperial examinations, and now with this engagement. He hated this arbitrary approach, and by extension, felt some aversion towards this marriage arrangement. Even though he was always happy to see Qin Shanshan, he maintained a cool and indifferent demeanor, as if happily accepting this marriage would be like bowing to his father again. They passed a few unremarkable years this way, and Qin Shanshan came of age. The Xie family held a coming-of-age ceremony for her. Her parents in City L sent her courtesy name and a jar of daughter's red wine. Everyone began to hint, openly and subtly, that she was grown up now, and they could get married. Perhaps influenced by these suggestions, he began to dream of her frequently. The dreams were always filled with spring scenery, too intimate to speak of. Even in daylight, seeing her silhouette, hearing her voice, accidentally touching her fingertips, all would stir strange impulses in him. His throat would feel dry and parched, thirsting to bite her. Siam Muyun was startled by his own thoughts. The youth instinctively avoided these unknown, shameful emotions, choosing to distance himself from her even more. On the day he was appointed by the emperor as the top scholar, he finally felt confident enough to defy his father. He broke off the engagement. He just didn't want to be manipulated by his father. But he never intended for Qin Shanshan to leave. In the 2 years since Qin Shanshan left, there was no sweet soup to sober him up after drinking. No thoughtful midnight snacks when he stayed up late reading. No delicious medicinal meals when he fell ill. It turned out she had already permeated his life, omnipresent. To the extent that without her, life became tasteless. He finally admitted it, this was love. He had loved her from the very beginning. It took her 7 years to make him fall in love with her. Yet it took him another 2 years to recognize his own heart. Sadly, it seemed too late now. Because at the welcoming banquet, he saw Gu Jun. The pair of mandarin duck jade pendants worn at the young general's waist was disturbingly familiar. He approached with a glimmer of hope to inquire. Gu Jun raised an eyebrow at him. "So you're Siam Muyun?" The two men stared at each other for a moment, wordless yet gleaning the information they sought from each other's eyes. Then their hostility became undisguised. At today's welcoming banquet, others hadn't drunk much. Only he and Gu Yunfei drank the most. They were deliberately trying to outdrink each other. Gu Yunfei actually had a better alcohol tolerance than him. When he came to the courtyard to vomit, Gu Yunfei was only slightly flushed. But as soon as Qin Shanshan appeared, the man who had just been boasting he could drink down 3 more Siam Muyun suddenly went soft and slumped onto the table, clinging to her arm and whimpering, refusing to let go. Siam Muyun felt a mouthful of old blood congeal in his heart. Yet Qin Shanshan fell for this clumsy act completely, believing it wholeheartedly and feeling terribly concerned. She went to brew sobering soup. That bowl of sobering soup that once belonged only to him, and handed it to someone else. The pair of mandarin duck jade pendants that once belonged only to him now hung at someone else's waist. The girl who once cared for him attentively now had her heart and eyes full of another person. So many times her figure had come to him in dreams, leaving only endless panic when he woke. He was terrified of that panic, but this time alone, he desperately wished this was also a dream. That when he woke up, she would just be away traveling, not having fallen for someone else. Qin Shanshan, please, don't be so cruel. Recently, I've been encountering Siam Muyun quite frequently. After just seeing him at last night's welcome banquet, I ran into him again today while buying my favorite osmanthus cake at the pastry shop. I politely greeted him. What a coincidence, Lord Xia. Are you here to buy pastries too? He held up the pastries in his hand and responded with a low "mm." I enviously glanced at the oiled paper package in his hand, seemingly containing the fragrance of osmanthus cakes. I remembered he didn't like osmanthus before. But that wasn't my concern. I shifted my gaze from the pastries to him and said, "Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you something yesterday. Our betrothal letter seems to be at your residence. When would it be convenient for me to retrieve it?" He suddenly looked up at me, his eyes rimmed with a faint red. "Do you really have to take it away?" I replied helplessly, "I actually think it's unnecessary too, but he always feels uneasy about it." Siam Muyun's gaze became even stranger, showing a hint of pity and grievance. I quickly explained after a moment's realization. "He doesn't doubt your character, it's just some childish jealousy. After all, we've already broken off the engagement, so it's better to take it back." He stared at me for a moment, then lowered his head to avoid my gaze. "I'm not sure, perhaps it's with my mother." It was normal for him not to know where the betrothal letter was, as he had never been satisfied with this marriage arrangement. I nodded. "All right, then I'll visit Aunt Xia another day to get it." I then focused on queuing. The long line in front of me was frustrating. I wondered if there would be any osmanthus cakes left by the time it was my turn. While I was pondering, Siam Muyun had already handed me his package of osmanthus cakes. "Don't queue. Take this one." I was stunned. That doesn't seem right. He must have come early to queue for these, surely he liked them very much. How could I take what he desired? "Then what will you eat?" "I don't need them anymore. When I returned home." Gu Yunfei had already been sitting in the guest hall with my parents for a quarter of an hour. He looked at me rather resentfully. Why weren't you home early in the morning? I went out for a morning walk and bought some pastries on the way. I put down the osmanthus cakes and casually said. I just ran into cousin Xia. He said the betrothal letter is with Aunt Xia, so I'll go to the Xia residence to get it another day. My mother was surprised to hear this. When the Xia family visited that day, I asked about the betrothal letter. She said Mu Yun had always kept it personally and hadn't given it to anyone. I was also surprised, but after a moment I understood. He's never been interested in this marriage, so he probably doesn't even remember where he put it. As I spoke, I looked at Gu Jun with some difficulty. However, he just chuckled meaningfully and wiped the sweat from my temple with a handkerchief. Don't worry about this anymore. I'll go and clarify things with him. Xia Muyun thought Qin Shanshan would come to the Xia residence again to ask for the betrothal letter. But unexpectedly, it was Gu Jun who came. It's just a piece of paper for betrothal. Is Grand Scholar Xia reluctant to part with it? Xia Muyun retorted, not to be outdone. It's just a piece of paper for betrothal. Why is young General Gu so insistent on taking it away? Gu Jun chuckled, without getting rid of the old one, how can we sign a new one? If I don't resolve this trouble with you, how can I feel at ease proposing? Xia Muyun's expression turned cold. The betrothal letter still exists, she's still my fiancée. What right do you have to propose? Fiancé? That's just your wishful thinking. Do you dare say that in front of her? Xia Muyun fell silent. Indeed, he didn't dare. He was the one who proposed breaking off the engagement. And now he was the one who couldn't let go. Of course he didn't dare. But to just let go like this, to watch her marry someone else, how could he be willing? We grew up together, innocent childhood friends. She liked me for 7 years. Gu Jun, you've only known her for 2 years. Gu Jun smiled indifferently. As they say, a brief encounter can feel like old friends, and old friends can feel like new. Liking someone isn't determined by time. As he spoke, he took out a sachet from his bosom. The scent was different from ordinary floral fragrances, it was a faint medicinal aroma. Gu Jun said somewhat proudly. The top scholar also parades through the streets, right? Have you ever caught her sachet? Xia Muyun's heart tightened. Gu Jun was asking if he had caught it. But he knew clearly that there was no question of catching or not catching. That day, she hadn't thrown a sachet towards him at all. Gu Jun continued to boast. You didn't even dare to openly catch a sachet. Such liking is not worth having. As for her once liking you? Heh. Her former liking for you was because she thought she had no other choice since childhood. But her liking for me is willingness after seeing the vast world. Now in her heart, I am the one she wants to spend her life with. While you are just a cousin she grew up with. You never even let her know you liked her. Xia Muyun, what right do you have to compete with me? This time, most of the Gu family troops entering the capital received some rewards. Gu Yunfei was promoted directly from 5th rank to 3rd rank. The emperor even personally asked him if he had any desired rewards. And he only asked for an imperial marriage decree. On the day of our wedding, half of the capital came to watch, creating a bustling scene with streets emptied of people. By the time we finished all the procedures, the moon was high in the sky. When we were finally left alone in the bridal chamber, I was already so tired I could barely stand up straight. Gu Jun massaged my back, and I was so comfortable I nearly fell asleep. But as I was drifting off, I suddenly felt a chill on my body. I opened my eyes to find Gu Jun had stripped down to just his undergarments. This was one of the wedding night procedures. I knew, but I didn't realize the specific process would be so embarrassing. He kissed my forehead, then trailed downwards. I was tossed back and forth by him, my body unbelievably soft as if my joints had come apart. Yet he grew more and more vigorous. I begged for mercy repeatedly until my voice grew hoarse. Only then did he slightly relent. Call me Yunfei once, and we'll stop here for today, how about that? I bit my lip, finding it hard to say out loud, so he started moving again. Jostled by his thrusts, I lay on the bed and stammered. Yunfei. Please. I really can't take it anymore. When we finally stopped, the wedding candles had burned out. I was so exhausted I couldn't even lift a finger, yet he lay by my ear, still unsatisfied. "Tomorrow we can try." My eyes flew wide open. Try? Try what? Tomorrow? There would be no tomorrow. Tomorrow I would move to the study and absolutely refuse to sleep with him. However, when tomorrow came, before I could even get out of bed, he pinned me down for another round of exhausting activities. Wedding nights are too short. But fortunately, we still have many more tomorrows to spend together. After the wedding, I returned to City M with Gu Jun and the others. In our third year back in City M, my parents also came to Province J. 9 years of exile hadn't changed my father's temperament. After 3 years back in the capital, he led a group of officials in loyal and direct remonstration, leaving the emperor thoroughly discomfited. The emperor finally lost patience and tossed him out of the capital again. But this time he wasn't as angry as before. The demotion in rank wasn't as severe, and he even sent him to Province J so our family could be reunited. Actually, after the wedding, the emperor had specially summoned the Qin and Gu families to the palace, saying if we young couple couldn't bear to be stationed at the border, he could recall us both. He could lead the capital's garrison, and I could enter the Imperial Medical Academy. We ultimately declined. The emperor narrowed his eyes at us. "You're both still young, and from privileged backgrounds. Why insist on enduring hardships at the border?" Gu Jun and I held each other's hands and said just 8 words. "To dedicate our lives to the country is our fortune. The capital is prosperous, talents abound. It doesn't lack one Gu Yunfei or one Qin Wanling. But the border needs young and capable commanders. And also needs good doctors to treat illnesses and save lives. I've seen the wind and snow at the border, seen the scars of the army, seen the peaceful lives of the common people. I'm willing to stay there, using my body as a shield to protect the country and ensure the people's peace." Side story, Xie Muyun. Among the matchmakers in the capital, there was an unwritten challenge. Whoever could win over young Master Xia, that aloof man, would be the most capable matchmaker in the capital. Unfortunately, no one had succeeded yet. The most famous Ms. Chen, after her 17th failed attempt, once asked him, "What kind of girl does young Master Xia want? At least give us a direction." An image unconsciously appeared in Xie Muyun's mind, but it was one he couldn't share with others. She was now a renowned doctor in Province J, living in harmony with Gu Jun. One was a merciless judge of the underworld, the other a compassionate healer. Yet somehow, they were an oddly perfect match, highly respected among the common people. If word got out that the reason Grand Scholar Xia hadn't married for years was because he liked General Gu's wife, Dr. Qin, the gossip mills would instantly churn out more than a dozen stories. In truth, Xie Muyun hadn't said he didn't want to marry. He was cordial to all matchmakers who came, genuinely trying to move on from Qin Shanshan. But so far, he hadn't succeeded. Qin Shanshan once said she didn't think the betrothal letter mattered. But Gu Jun insisted on taking it back. In fact, Gu Jun's concerns were quite reasonable. Because Xie Muyun had indeed considered that with the betrothal letter in hand. Legally speaking, he could force Qin Shanshan to marry him. But she would likely be very upset. He had already lost his fiancée Qin Shanshan, he couldn't bear to lose his cousin Qin Shanshan as well. So when Gu Jun came that day, he took out the faded red paper and tore it to pieces in front of him. After Gu Jun left, he slowly opened his tightly clenched left hand, revealing a corner fragment of the marriage contract in his palm. The red paper was crumpled in his hand, slightly damp with sweat. He smoothed out the paper, which clearly showed the signatures of 2 names. Qin Shanshan, Xie Muyun. He had once been lucky, engaged to the girl he liked most. But he didn't know it at the time. He always thought the world was vast, and there must be better girls out there. He annulled the engagement, giving both of them a chance to explore. Later, she found a man she liked more, they understood each other, and their love grew deep. But he never found a girl he liked more for the rest of his life. Indeed, there were many better girls in the world, but there was only one Qin Shanshan. And Xie Muyun only loved Qin Shanshan. Unfortunately, this was something he never let her know for the rest of his life.